Where's that science fair guide, King? Make that science fair vid, on God. Yo, when are you dropping the science fair guide? You said you would drop. I'm gonna need that science fair. I recently won first place in ISEF. Thanks for your help. Hang on, bro. I haven't even made the video yet. If competing in science fairs was a sport, I'd like to think I'm going D1 any day of the week. This extracurricular was the bread and butter to my college application, and honestly, the main reason I got into Ivy League colleges. I've been to ISEF, I've won awards at all of these national level competitions, and I want to show you exactly how I did it. Most people's first exposure to science fairs is in elementary school, where you do that little Coke and Mentos experiment, and then you present your results. You make the trifold poster board, you show your conclusion to your homies' parents, and they give you a little pat on the back. Great job, buddy. Life is good. The real fun starts once you get to high school science fairs, because now the competitions have stakes. National level awards, scholarships, the grand prize at ISEF, which is the biggest international science fair, is 75 grand. Now that shouldn't be your motivation for doing science fair, but it starts to put things into perspective. The way high school science fairs work is relatively straightforward. You first spend a couple months putting together your research project, experimenting, and then getting conclusions. You then go to a physical fair where you stand in front of your trifold poster board presentation and you present your work to judges like you typically see if you just Google ISEF online. They might ask you questions one-on-one, they might ask you for a 30-second pitch, the fair could even be virtual and you end up just presenting a Google Slides deck. But as we start talking about science fairs, I want you to at least know the basics of what you're getting yourself into. In sharp contrast, when you go to your local HOSA or DECA event, you're usually paying hundreds of dollars out of your own pocket to go and compete because the event itself doesn't have any funding. When you get selected to go to ISEF, it's completely free, all expenses paid. They will fly you out to Atlanta or Dallas or Anaheim or wherever the fair is being hosted that year because the sponsors and the donors know that the students who are doing these projects are making amazing contributions to society through their research and they want to support that. Science fairs genuinely defined my high school experience. It taught me public speaking, it taught me critical thinking, and the scholarship money didn't hurt. Before we even get into talking about fairs and ISEF, your focus needs to be on the backbone of this activity, the research project. I've made videos on research. What I want to talk about here is coming up with a research project that's competitive. Now, there are levels to research. As a third grader, making a baking soda volcano with your parents is appropriate. As a high schooler, if you show up to a fair with that same project, you're gonna get bullied. The main distinguishing point between these introductory projects and winning high school projects is that they have real world impact. You go from doing a simple project to learn the scientific process to using that process to research something meaningful. When you're at a science fair, you get to choose a category to compete in. There are categories for medicine, computer science, animal sciences, all the big topics you can think of. So for example, I would usually compete in the biomedical engineering category because my research was in the field of epilepsy and I was developing algorithms in a medical device. That category fit my work perfectly. Anything from chemistry to astronomy is fair game for your research. It just needs to be science. I know at this point you're probably itching for examples of projects, so I'm gonna put you on. If you just go onto Google, you can follow along with me right now and type in ISEF abstracts. The very first link that comes up is this abstract search utility, okay? It's from the Society for Science. What you want to do is click on this. So the Society for Science is basically the organization that runs ISEF as well as a lot of the biggest science fairs. Right on their website here, you can just scroll down and you see that it lets you search for projects by keyword. It lets you search by finalist last name if you're looking for someone in particular's project. You can also sort by project category. I'm just gonna go ahead here and select biomedical engineering. I like the field. And then here you can pick country. Let's just do the United States. And fair state doesn't really matter to us. Now for ISEF year, the first default option is all/any. I would recommend looking at projects that were much more recent. I think there's a bit of a discrepancy in maybe the quality of the projects or the level or the type of research being done in 2014 versus the most recent year. Those old projects are still great, but we prefer what's going on right now. And then we can just switch to only winning abstracts and click search. Immediately it brings me to this page where we have how many total abstracts? 57 entries. 57 different projects that you can go ahead, click on this link right here. Let's just pick this one, for instance. And boom, it brings us to a page where we can see the title of the project, right? And then the full abstract, 250 words explanation of what the student did. This particular project is called Tremor Sense, a novel Parkinsonian tremor monitoring and suppression system. Not every title is going to be as easily understandable or explain the project, but in this particular case, it honestly makes perfect sense, right? The person is interested in Parkinson's disease and their project revolves around building a tremor monitoring device. And if we go into the abstract, I haven't even read this, right? But immediately my eyes go to this port down here, right? Arduino Nano. I can assume that they use the Arduino to build some kind of a low-cost device. Bro, look at this, under 40 grams, costing under $40, right? You see where I'm going with this. If there's a particular field that you're interested in, right? Maybe it's biomedical engineering, maybe it's something completely different. You can always go to this Society for Science website, click on that category, and get some inspiration from what kind of science projects other students are doing, what seems to be popular, what seems to be working. You can use that as a basis to just get started on other areas within that field, other subtopics that you can go ahead and research deeper. Once you've done some digging on your own and you understand the level, the expectation, we can start talking about how to actually bring out that impact. If you want to impress judges, your research work needs to be making a genuine advancement in whatever field it is that you're working on. That is way easier said than done, but what you can't do here is go online, take like a Science Buddies project, or take some research that already exists and just copy it and show up to fairs expecting to win. If you're watching this and you're completely unsure about where to start, let me give you some advice. I'd say about 95% of the DMs I receive are from people who say, Pratik, I want to do research in medicine. What do I do next? Hold on, buddy. Let's lock in. There are more subtopics within the field of medicine than you would be able to explore in your entire life. Your very next step is figuring out exactly what in medicine do you like, and then going ahead and reading papers on those topics, seeing what new advancements are being made, seeing how patients and people, or if you're interested in a very different topic, right? Seeing how just general advancements are being made, and then using that as inspiration to figure out, okay, what can I do to contribute to what's already going on in the scientific community? I'm also here to tell it to you how it is. If you love microbiology, that's fantastic. But if the problem you want to solve requires $100,000 of lab equipment or some special technology that barely exists, it's probably not feasible to do. Either you reach out to local labs that might let you come in. So for example, a local university might let you come in, or if there's like a private research lab in your community, they might let you do some work. Or instead of begging to borrow equipment, you shift the research topic to something that you could pursue more easily at home. I also personally felt that as a high schooler, there's a lot more flexibility in your projects and what you can do if you know how to code. You don't need any equipment. You can start pretty easily just by using open source code online. And honestly, you're really only limited by the data sets that are publicly available. Now, this isn't a hard fact by any means. The majority of ISEF projects have nothing to do with coding. But if you have no clue where to start, and maybe a coding background, it's a suggestion. Another way to get involved in science fairs is actually to go do an internship. If you want the honest truth here, almost every single ISEF winner had some kind of a mentor who helped provide them with support. If you have literally no research experience, teaching yourself the scientific process and those critical thinking skills is not something you could just do one afternoon. Going and doing an internship to get your first real exposure to science is an amazing way to get started. Now from there, here's how you get on the inside track. If the mentor or professor you're working with gives you the thumbs up for this, you can take the research work you were doing at the internship, build on it some more with your own little touch, your own spin to it, and then take it and compete at science fairs. The advantage here is that you get guidance coming up with the project. You have access to resources through wherever you did the internship, so if you want to do more tests, you can do that. And also, if any questions come up along the journey when you're doing some more independent research to keep adding onto it, you can just ask your mentor. They were with you through this whole process, right? They're gonna be willing to answer a question or two here and there. As a bonus, doing this even gives you the possibility to get a return offer for that internship, maybe next summer, or you can even go on to publish a research paper with your mentor, which would be sensational. Understand that when you go to a science fair, a huge part of your ability to succeed is in the way that you market your project. There's no workaround to lazy research, but there are absolutely amazing projects out there that go unnoticed by judges. Because either the people reviewing your project don't understand what you did, or they're not impressed by the way that you're marketing it. Even if your research is highly theoretical, there should be some kind of a clean explanation, a clean takeaway for how your research can be applied to the real world for actual benefits. So for example, imagine we're marketing that Parkinson's project we looked at a couple minutes ago. There are 500,000 Americans diagnosed with Parkinson's. Current treatment options are expensive and the medication is unreliable. Almost 75% of all Parkinson's patients don't respond to given treatment. So to help these people, I designed a low-cost, sub-$40 Arduino Nano monitoring device to... You see where I'm going with this. Even if the research is theoretical and complex, and honestly boring to the average person, your ability to convince people that it's important is just as key to your success. If you want more guidance on how to start a research project or get yourself an internship, you can watch these videos here. I don't want to repeat myself, or you can schedule a one-on-one call with me by clicking the link in the description and I can help you get started. Throughout this video, I've been throwing around the word ISEF. Let's talk about how you can actually get there and what competitions you should be attending. Across the United States, every state has regional level and state level science fairs fair competitions. Think of getting to ISEF like a pyramid. Everyone is allowed to show up to regional competitions and present their work. Judges will come by, you'll talk to them, you'll answer their questions, maybe even give them a small presentation, and then they'll score your project. At the very end of the fair, there will then be an award ceremony where they give out prizes. The main achievement is winning first place in your category. So for example, if you're competing in the computer science category, you are competing against other computer science projects for those first, second, and third places. If you do well at the regional fair, which usually means placing first or second in your category, you qualify to then go on to the state fair, which is the next level up. Naturally, the projects here get more competitive, but the prizes get better as well. But where does ISEF come into the picture? The state fairs and also the regional fairs have a specific number of spots for projects they can send to ISEF. I grew up and competed in Oregon, and our state fair was allowed to send 6 students to ISEF. My regional fair, which was near Portland, was allowed to send 4 students to ISEF. The projects that get picked to go to ISEF are the best out of everyone that's there, regardless of category. In other words, how this usually works in practice is the judges take all of the projects that won first place in their category, and then they compare them all to see which of those projects was the best and which deserved to go on to compete at ISEF. Everyone's science fair journey looks different. Some people go on to the state fair, some people win at the state fair, and a select few people end up making it to the final ISEF level. Just getting to ISEF is so competitive that it is an honor in itself to go and attend the fair. You can absolutely put it onto your college application, write that you're an ISEF finalist, even if when you go to that final international competition, you don't end up winning like a big award there. Now, I'm not just gonna leave you here. I also wanna show you exactly how you can find these local fairs in your area to go ahead, register, and compete this next upcoming season. One more time here, we're gonna go onto Google, we're gonna look up find a fair, and then you see the second link here, go to this exact website, findafair.societyforscience.org, and we can just scroll down here, and they make it so simple for you. Click with you're probably living in the United States if you watch this, or they have a bunch of other countries, right? Maybe if you live in India, this works too. I haven't tested it. Go ahead and in the state, scroll down. I'm personally from Oregon, right? So I'm just gonna click on Oregon, and then look up ISEF fairs. The Thermo Fisher one is like for middle school, ISEF is for high school, and then boom. Immediately we have this list of like affiliated fairs that send students to ISEF. So personally, I know that like Gresham's like a city in Oregon, so I'm gonna keep scrolling down. Beaverton, Hillsboro is like the school district that I'm in, right? So if I see that, I know this is around the area that I live. This is probably the fair that makes sense for me. Every state has a list like this, and if you just keep scrolling down, you can see all of the different regional fairs, right? This one is for downtown Portland people. This one's for, I don't even know where West Lynn is. And then if we go all the way down to like the very bottom here, we can see this, Northwest Science Expo. Again, it's listed as Portland, but if you click on the link, you can see that this is actually the Oregon State Fair. My point here being, your regional fair and your state fair is both listed on this website. This is the key to figuring out exactly how you're going to get yourself to ISEF. What we've talked about so far in this video is the conventional pathway to go through your local science fair and get to ISEF. But one of the biggest advantages of competing in science fairs is that there are so many other competitions and events that you can go to with this exact same research and win national level awards and scholarships and everything else that you're getting through the traditional process. For other clubs where there's only one competition a year, if things don't pan out, you have to wait so long before you can go and try again. With science fairs, okay homie, you didn't make ISEF, there are literally 10 other prestigious alternatives that you can go to immediately and compete. It's not something to sweat over. I'll put you onto all the ones that I either found success in or I applied to personally, but just keep in mind there are also a bunch of very niche fairs depending on what subject area your research is in. So for example, let's say you're doing like a sustainability project. There are going to be science fairs out there that are just meant for sustainability people who are working on low energy alternatives, renewable energy sources, things of that nature. There might also be fairs that are just unique to your city or your state. Go online and do your homework. The Junior Science and Humanities Symposium, or JSHS, is so underrated. They give thousands of dollars in scholarships. It's very similar in process to the normal science fairs. Go ahead and apply. Davidson Fellows is a really competitive one that you might have heard of. Their top prizes are like $50K, $25K, and $10K scholarships. That's all they give. Like, it doesn't get any lower than that. Probably worth your time. There's also the BioGenius Fair, which, like, don't quote me on it, but I'm pretty sure it's virtual if you're outside of the state of California. And so you can always just take what you already did. You already have like a poster pre-made for your local fair, right? Which is what they ask for you to have. Just take it, submit it in, and then forget about it. I really enjoyed competing for the American Academy of Neurology's High School Neuroscience Research Prize. This is one of those examples of niche fairs that has to make sense for your project. My research was on epilepsy, so it fit the topic perfectly. If your research is also on the brain, go ahead and apply to this. And then lastly, for my younger viewers who might be in middle school, this fair is going to be your go-to. It used to be called Broadcom Masters. I personally competed in it and it went to like the whole finalist, flew out to Washington, DC, did the whole thing. It was an amazing experience. If you have the time earlier on to start doing science fair, go ahead and look into this fair. Some of these fairs are normal in-person events. Other fairs will ask you to submit a video or a research paper or to give a virtual presentation. With every competition you apply to, it becomes easier because you can reuse the exact same materials. It's the same project. Let's talk about timeline. Say you have some idea for your science project, but you haven't really started on experimentation. When do you need to get things done by in order to keep pace with what other people are doing? The more research you can do during the summer, the better, just because you have the free time. But if I'm being completely honest, the majority of people, including myself, just do their science fair project in the fall as the school year is ramping up. Take from August to December to do all of your experimentation and to come to some kind of a conclusion. Usually around September is when you need to register for your local fair, so keep an eye out for that. January and February are like your summary months, where you basically take your findings, organize it into whatever presentation format that your fair wants. Maybe that's a slide deck, maybe that's the trifold poster board, and then you go to the fair to present your work. Most regional competitions and fairs happen around February to March, and most state fairs happen around March to April. ISEF happens every year in May, usually like that second week, and the other competitions we talked about, like those other random ones, they happen throughout the entire year. So just keep an eye out for those. What I really recommend doing is to take all the competitions that you're interested in and just put it all into like a Google Sheets file, right? Where that way you have the competition name, you have the requirements, as well as like the dates where you have to submit everything by, and then you can just go through the year every month and hit every single fair on time, put your best foot forward, and win those awards. In my years of doing science fair, I've come across a couple go-to strategies that basically all people who win big at science fairs do. I'm here to ungatekeep everything. Let's talk. If I haven't made it clear enough by this point in the video, you need to be applying to as many competitions as possible. I remember when I was in 9th grade, it was my first year of competing in high school, a judge told me this and it basically stuck with me for the entire rest of my time in high school. There are going to be some fairs that you go to where the judges connect with your project, and there are going to be some that you go to where the judges don't. You want to bring the odds back in your favor, and you do that by applying to more competitions and increasing the likelihood that you go to somewhere where they relate to your project and they give you some kind of award or recognition for that. Do not put on the blinders and think that ISEF is the only way to be successful in science fairs. There are so many other ways to win, literally 5 figures, 6 figures worth of scholarships that will help you tremendously from both a college app perspective and to pay for college. And just think about it practically for a second. If you apply to 10 different fairs, you can't go ahead and win all of them, right? That's not the expectation here. But if you apply to 10 different fairs and you win just 1 or 2 of them, that is your golden ticket right there to getting into an Ivy League college. The next tip is understanding the rules of science fair better. You are allowed to do the same project multiple years in a row. Now, you can't submit the exact same research work, right? That's not allowed. But what you're allowed to do is what's called a continuation project, where you take research that you originally started, you build on it meaningfully one step further over the next year, and then you basically apply to the same competition with that advanced research. Building an incredible project in just 1 year or 6 months is a massive feat. But if you had an extra year where you took the science fair project 1 year, you show up to the fair, you see what the judges have to say, you get your feedback on it, maybe it doesn't work out for you, and then you take the next year from there to just build on it, fix all the holes the judges had, all the feedback they gave you, make it way, way better, and then you come back to that same fair with that advanced project, think about how much more successful you're going to be. Almost all of the top projects that you see go on to win at ISEF and whatnot were not projects that people just cooked up in 2 months. They were projects that took years to put together, and that final stage is what you're seeing. This also kind of goes to say that the earlier you start doing an activity like science fair in high school, the more successful you're gonna be, and that goes for pretty much any top activity that you really want to invest your time into from like a college app perspective. Even if this was something like Science Olympiad, for every year that you go on and compete in that Olympiad, the more knowledge you're going to be able to learn, the more topics you're going to be able to study, you're just going to be better at it. Earlier in the video, I mentioned that you can compete in pretty much any category, which is true, but there are some categories that are naturally going to be easier than others. At almost any given fair, I'm just gonna be very honest here, the 2 most competitive categories are typically going to be computer science and medicine. They're just the most popular and they attract the most projects. So the number of people that you're competing with is going to be more, and the level of the projects is only going to get more and more narrow. There's only 1 first place award and 1 second place award. If there's 50 projects here compared to another category that has 5, what are the odds that you go on to win? Now, it's not not like you can just take a super heavy CS project and throw it into animal sciences because there's only 2 people competing in that category at your event. But what I will say is that if you have a project that has some back-end CS work, but the main focus of it is something like biology or physics, it might make sense to put your project in those categories and compete under that title so that it just helps your odds of success. And if the judges at your science fair ever feel like you're mislabeling your project, they will just take your project and move it to the correct category. So don't feel like there's ever going to be like a penalty for it or anything of that nature. If you took a step too far or you mislabeled your project, they're automatically going to put you right back into the correct category that you were supposed to be in. When it comes to making it to ISEF, there are those 2 pathways we talked about. You can make it there through your regional fair and your state fair. If we're being super honest here, almost every time it's going to be easier to get to ISEF through your regional fair, even if there are less spots. Like my regional fair only had 4 spots compared to the state fair that has 6. If you're in a state like California, where there's like the Northern California competition, Southern California, your state fair might have even more spots than that. But the truth is that your regional fair, just like what we talked about with the categories, likely has less students there, and it's likely overall less competitive. Every project that shows up to the state fair has been filtered out, the student has been working hard for it, they considered the feedback from their last fair, they're coming in with their best work. It's hard to make it to that final round of judging where you can actually get yourself in a position where you can be qualified for ISEF. Even if your regional fair is competitive, it's not going to compare to your state fair. Think of your state fair as being the second round, like backup option to get to ISEF if your regional fair doesn't work. You want to try to get to ISEF off rip. If you can make it through your regional fair, it just takes such a burden off of you. You can show up to the state fair, you're smiling, you know whatever happens there doesn't really matter. It takes that pressure off of you early on, and just to kind of summarize what I'm saying here, it is easier to do. One of the most important tips of this entire video that I can give to you is in regards to networking with ISEF students. Every science fair looks different. I can go ahead and give you in-depth feedback for how to try to get to ISEF from my local Portland fair, because that's what I know. But your fair is not going to look like that, and what you want is to get advice from someone who got to ISEF through that same fair. They're gonna have the inside scoop on how the judging works, what exactly worked for them. You want to talk to them and learn that information. The good news here is that like 99% of the time, if students qualify directly to ISEF, it's like published on your local science fair's website or on your state fair's website. It's like all their names, maybe their email is even listed out for you to go ahead and figure out who they are. And then from there, you can either message them on LinkedIn, or you can go through like your school system's database of emails, figure out what their email is, and then just shoot them a little email saying, hey, I'm interested in science fair, my project is on this and this, can we get on a quick 10-15 minute call to talk a little bit about what your experience was like at ISEF and give me a little bit of advice. I'm telling you, this would take you maybe 1 afternoon to complete, and it's one of the best things that you can do to maximize your odds of being able to get to ISEF. There is literally no point paying hundreds or thousands of dollars for coaching when you can talk to these students for free and they will probably give you better advice than everyone else because they actually went to your fair. Do not get scammed by these internet grifters. Find some real life friends who will give you the advice and then get the inputs from them to get yourself to that top level. At most science fairs, bending the rules just a little bit is usually okay. Don't get yourself disqualified because of the feedback I'm about to give you. But generally speaking, if they've asked you to do like a 12-slide presentation and they give you an outline for what those 12 slides should look like, you can adapt that into your own interpretation and include maybe 1 slide that makes perfect sense for your project that isn't included in the outline that they give you. I remember one thing I loved to do was have a live demo at these science fairs. That's something where the rules can get a little bit in the gray area, but having something physical that the judges can see, or if you're doing like an online presentation, I would have a recorded video embedded into my slideshow that I'd play for like 30 seconds or a minute, and I just narrate it as it's going through it so the judges have something to look at. It keeps them engaged, it's interesting, it's different. If you can get away with doing that at your fair, do it to stand out. It can also be really nice to have like a physical log notebook that documents your whole research journey. Some students like to have a research binder. That's something that I did, where I printed out a bunch of like the best papers related to my research subject area. I annotated them, highlighted them, and then I kept that in front of my poster board presentation just for judges to come by and see so that they knew the amount of work that I was putting into it. All these little things are not essential, but holistically, they help show judges how much you care about your project, and they help elevate your work just beyond what other people around you are doing. If you made it this far into the video, I appreciate you so much. I want to give you some of my like raw personal tips. Let's call this the unfiltered section. If there is one single takeaway from this entire video on how to be a better researcher, it is to read papers. Every single time you're doing your research and you get stuck, you read papers. You want inspiration, you read papers. You're sitting at home, bored, done with TikTok, your brain's fried, you don't know what to do, go read some papers. That is the key to this whole process. I wish this was something I could have learned earlier on. It is so valuable in academia to be well read on the research papers in your field. It gives you so much food for thought to come up with new ideas, to problem solve, to think critically, and generally speaking, it's just interesting. When judges are eventually out there grilling you, asking you questions, you're going to fall back on this foundation of knowledge that you have in order to address all the different things that they might bring up. And speaking of judges asking you questions, you should 100% be grinding preparation before every single science fair you go to. Get your parents to ask you questions, get your friends, get other ISEF students that you know to ask you questions, get your science teachers to ask you questions. If you know anyone in your local community, I know one thing that I used to do is I used to go to like local uncles that worked at tech companies or professors that worked in fields similar to what my research was in, and I would always before fairs present my research work to them and then have them do like a half an hour grilling session to try to plug every single hole in my project. There is no world where you should be going to a science fair and having a judge bring up a point that you hadn't previously considered, okay? The judge at the science fair has only known your project for the last couple of hours, and they probably only spent like 10-15 minutes even thinking about it. You want to have every single angle considered. What are your next steps gonna be? What are any holes in your conclusions? What are any weak points of your project in regards to the data that you had, or any strong points in your conclusion that you want to highlight? You should have a solid 30 seconds to 1 minute pitch on go, and the rest of your prep can pretty much just go straight into Q&A, getting ready for anything that the judges could tackle or ask you about within the bounds of your project. If you are going to a conventional science fair where you have like a standard trifold poster board, you have all your slides printed out to go ahead and present, I think the most elite version of this is to do like the 1.5x height board. So typically the standard trifold board is going to be 3 feet tall. You are allowed to have your trifold board go up to 6 feet tall, right? You're doing a 2x, a double board. Personally, I found the best success to be at the 1.5 times height, because it's not like if your board is like double height, right? 6 feet tall, you're putting it on a table, judges have to like break their neck trying to read like what's at the top of your presentation. They're not gonna read all that. But for a board that's like 1.5 times taller, so we're talking total 4.5 feet tall, you have the space to include all of the extra information that you want. It looks physically like more impressive, right? If you're surrounded by a bunch of 3 feet tall boards and your board is just taller, off rip the judges have something to just be impressed about. And then of course the practicality of just being able to have more on your slides that as you're presenting you can reference. You always want to be, whenever you're explaining a concept, bringing your hands and gesturing towards the board. Maybe you have a graph that you want to talk about. Maybe there's a certain fact or data point that you want to point out. Keep the judges engaged in that way. Your board is not just there to stand alone and just be there in the background as you present. That is meant to be there to help you. Most judges are not taking the time to read every single word on your board. So think about it this way. You want to leverage that board to be able to present all the information that you want, right? So keep that board behind you, use it as your way of referencing, and keep any important graphs right in an easy accessible area to where you can just go ahead and point and reference the judges in the right direction. The entire science fair journey is not easy, but good things in life never come easy. When you finally make it through it, it is so unbelievably rewarding. Even if you go to these fairs and you don't win, the amount of knowledge that you gain about the research process, the amount that this helps you if you ever decide to go into a field like engineering, a field like medicine, where having these skills is literally something you apply on a day-to-day basis, science fair sets you up amazingly for your career. And to double down on that point of not winning awards, if you're taking science fair super seriously, the likelihood that you go on to win something if you follow everything I talked about in this video is very high. But even if for some reason that doesn't work out, you can still take the research work you did, use it, apply to journals, get your paper published, and that in itself is an honor you can put straight into the awards section of your Common App. As always, if you guys have any other questions, leave a comment down below or follow and DM me on Instagram. I'm happy to help. And if you want to get on a one-on-one consulting call with me, click the link below. Thank you all so much for watching. I know this video is long awaited. This has been your boy Pratik. Peace.